We've got some breaking news now. As the coalition is no more, I'm joined by my colleague, senior correspondent Cam Redden, and Cam is with me as we've got some breaking news, Cam. I want to start our reporting this hour by quoting for our viewers several quotes from senior members, Liberal members of the Shadow Cabinet. I've spoken to three of them in the last 30 to 40 minutes, and I just want to read for our viewers some of the descriptions of David Littleproud. Now, this is breaking news. These are senior Liberals that were in all of the meetings with David Littleproud, the Shadow Cabinet discussions. Quote, he is a pathological liar, that everything Barnaby Joyce has said about him is true, that he flat out lied, there is no other way to put it, that he is paralysed by fear, and that the whole show is being run by Matt Canavan. David Littleproud had given the indication from my sources in the Liberal Party and senior sources at no point that they were going to oppose the Liberal Party position. In fact, in various meetings over the last few days, he had indicated to senior Liberals that they had, and via the government, alleviated all their concerns. Flat out liar, pathological liar, revisionist BS is how that news conference was described earlier. And the most potent thing here of all, I think, is this suggestion that he is paralysed by fear. The comment as well that they can't run a coalition under the Lee leadership was said to me, that is the dumbest thing he could have said. That who is he to tell us who the Liberal leader should be? This has been put to me by members of the Shadow Cabinet, Liberals, not just moderates or Conservatives, but I've spoken to individuals from across that spectrum this morning. Also, not just Shadow Ministers, but others who were aware of what went on in those meetings. But three specific Shadow Ministers, Liberals, that have said to me this morning that he's a liar, pathological liar, flat out lied, and everything Barnaby Joyce has said about David Littleproud is true. Extraordinary scenes. Not only is the coalition no more, it has blown up. It is irretrievable with the two current leaders, and this sense within the Liberal Party at the highest ranks that the whole National Party decision-making is being driven, dictated to by Matt Canavan, who is not even on the front bench.
There is a serious view within senior Liberals, Kieran, as reflected in those comments, that this is an attempt by the Nationals to bring down Susan Lee's leadership before David Littleproud has his leadership challenged, that one of them is going to have to go. Their relationship has not been good for a while. That is obvious from not just those comments, but from what both have really indicated, particularly David Littleproud this morning, saying it's not tenable to be in a coalition under Susan Lee, that Nationals shadow ministers would not serve in a Susan Lee-led ministry. So forget a couple of days, they can patch this up, it's done. So there's no more coalition. What you've just reported there, Kieran, has been, well, that is damning of both leaders. It really suggests that perhaps this decision to split the coalition that's happened this morning is mutually assured destruction for both of them, because David Littleproud really got the first word in to say this is all Susan Lee's fault, that we had no choice, they all had to resign. And now what you've reported there is, if you like, the push back from Liberals saying, no, this is all his fault. So,
and the other thing is as well, from the Liberals that I've spoken to just in this last little while, is that it was really a poor move. It's going to reflect badly on him, according to their assessment. And as I say, it's not just moderates or Conservatives. I've spoken to individuals from across the spectrum here. It's not just the Lee faction, for example, that he has done himself a massive disservice by carrying on with this on a day of mourning.
And that suggests, Kieran, that language suggests that there's going to be no coalition, even if Susan Lee is to be replaced, that it can't be with David Littleproud leading the Nationals. How can it be if that's the view? What did you say? Pathological liar, a man who went back on his word, revisionist BS, throwing it all at the feet of Susan Lee. Flat
out lied, a liar. That was the theme of every single conversation I've had. And as I say, not individuals necessarily who you would say that person is in the Susan Lee
it cuts
camp.
across factions.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So it is extraordinary. It's blown up, and it is irretrievable, certainly, between Lee and Littleproud. But comments along the lines, as I reported, in relation to Barnaby Joyce was always right about David Littleproud is extraordinary, because we know Barnaby Joyce and David Littleproud can't stand each other, that he's got a very dim view of the leader, but pathological liar was the exact description by one senior Liberal. So it is quite amazing, and also the fact that they had felt and were made clear by David Littleproud that any concerns the Nats had been alleviated during the discussions, that after several meetings of the National Party room, he was not able to bring his party with him, that he's paralysed by fear, according to one senior Liberal, and this is all being run, the whole show, by Matt Canavan. It is pretty, it's quite extraordinary.
It is, and out of fear of the One Nation creep in their electorates, Kieran, amongst their base, the fear that the right of politics is fracturing. I want to play some of David Littleproud's comments in a moment, but on the point that you raised there about that Sunday night meeting, it's worth showing this line in Bridget McKenzie's resignation letter, which we've been reporting on Sky News this morning, which explicitly reflects the view that was, at least to my understanding from the Liberals and Nationals I speak to, was the view that they had all landed on an agreement to support this bill with some amendments. Let's show you this line in Bridget McKenzie's resignation letter. This is what she gave to Susan Lee yesterday. I was unable to support the decision taken to on the legislation to support the bill in its amended form. She says clearly there was a decision. The National Party room has blown up. They're not happy. Matt Canavan, among others, raising concerns about this, and that's what has led us here today. And there is fury within the Liberal Party that this has all happened on the National Day of Mourning at a time when they thought that things were getting better in the new year, that they had an all right summer, that maybe they could put the government on the back foot. Remember, on Saturday, the Prime Minister had to split his bill in half, gut one of the key elements of it, looked like he was on the back foot, couldn't get a deal. And less than 5 days later, it's passed with Liberal support and the coalition is in tatters. Here's some of what David Littleproud had to say this morning after making that decision to rip the Nationals out and end the coalition.
We're at a juncture where no one was prepared to serve in a Susan Lee ministry, and that she has forced the coalition into an untenable position. That's the sad place that we've got to. There was an opportunity that she could have grabbed in understanding the unique nature of the circumstances that were put in front of her. It all laid to her. The decision process ultimately always came back at her feet. She made that decision. She knew the consequence.
Other members of the Nationals continue to plead their case. They say it doesn't matter almost what the agreement in the room was, that they decided the party room would trump the shadow cabinet decision, and ultimately the Nationals had no choice. Here's Anne Webster speaking on Sky News a moment ago.
I don't know what the words were that were taken, but the fact of the matter is that as amendments were still happening...
As Einstein said, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. She made that decision knowing what the consequences would be, and you've seen that play out.
So you're fine for the split, aren't you? You don't want the coalition to stay together.
So we've all made it very, very clear that we are coalitionists. This is a decision for Susan Lee.
Parliament's back here on February 3, so we'll see if there are any leadership happenings then, potentially earlier, who knows at this rate. But Kieran, this is the stark political reality for the non-Labor parties on the floor of the Parliament. So with the coalition split, the Liberal Party is the second biggest party, 66 seats shy of Labor. Now, I know a majority of one in the House doesn't make a lot of difference to a majority of nearly 20, but that is the reality. The right of politics fractures the opposition to Labor. It makes putting any kind of united front to oppose the government difficult and plays into the hands of One Nation. That is a concern of both Liberals and Nationals, but clearly, Kieran, as you have reported there, the relationship's so toxic that these two leaders cannot repair it.
A senior Liberal source messaged while we've been on air and says David Littleproud has just united the Liberal Party room behind Susan Lee in a way that was impossible 24 hours ago. This ends with David being rolled, not Susan. Thank you, David. So that again goes to that line about that he could not, the Nats can't operate in a coalition under the leadership. But,
then who is the leader of the National Party? It's a small room. It can change.
Well, as I say, there is a view, and you've heard similar sentiment, but certainly repeated to me by senior Liberals this morning, that Matt Canavan is running the show in the Nats, that he's dictating terms here, and that the leader, in the words of one Liberal, that David Littleproud, is paralysed by fear.
Well, if that's the case, and if Matt Canavan does become the leader, that could pose serious policy challenges for the Liberal Party, because they've only just landed their climate deal, and yes, they're out of net zero and there are changes there, but immigration still hasn't been settled. There's a policy coming on that. Are they going to be able to find middle ground there? We'll see, Kieran.
Yep, Cam, well, we will stay in touch. Thanks so much for that. Big news in politics today.